TV soap news and spoilers say that in the sultry, shadow-laden world of Beyond the Gates, where secrets fester like wounds and alliances shift with the volatility of a summer storm, the saga of Leslie, Ted, Nicole, and Anita unfolds with a ferocity that grips the heart and refuses to let go. The latest chapter in this tangled web of love, betrayal, and retribution centers on a single, explosive moment: Anita's furious decision to strip Leslie of her inheritance, a move that reverberates through the lives of every character caught in its wake. What began as a reckless act of passion in a dimly lit hotel room spirals into a dramatic showdown, exposing raw emotions, fractured loyalties, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. Let us dive into this tempestuous tale, where every choice carries the weight of destiny, and no one emerges unscathed. The Catalyst, a night of reckless passion. The story ignites on a sweltering evening, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the hum of cicadas, as Leslie, ever impulsive and driven by a volatile mix of desire and defiance, races to Ted's hotel room. The news had come from Eva, her voice dripping with malicious glee. Ted was drunk, vulnerable, and alone. For Leslie, this was not just an opportunity, it was a clarion call. Her heart, a battlefield of unresolved longing and unhealed wounds, propelled her forward. She didn't pause to consider the consequences, didn't weigh the moral cost. This was Leslie at her core, a woman who acted on instinct, consequences be damned. Ted, sprawled across the rumpled sheets of his hotel bed, was in no state to resist. The whiskey had dulled his senses, blurring the edges of his judgment until the world was a haze of warmth and regret. When Leslie slipped into the room, her silhouette framed by the flickering neon light filtering through the blinds, he barely registered her presence. Their encounter was a collision of desperation and delusion, a fleeting moment of intimacy that would soon detonate like a time bomb in their lives. Morning broke with a cruel clarity. Ted awoke, his head pounding as if 1,000 hammers were striking his skull, his mouth dry as ash. The sight of Leslie beside him sent a jolt of panic through his veins. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow, her lips curved in a satisfied smirk even in sleep. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room, his voice trembling with dread. The weight of his betrayal settled over him like a shroud, suffocating and inescapable. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face, hoping to wash away the memory of the night before. But some sins cling too tightly to be rinsed away. The tie, a symbol of defiance. Leslie, however, was not one to linger in the shadows of regret. She rose from the bed with the confidence of a predator who had claimed her prize. Her eyes fell on Ted's tie, a sleek strip of crimson silk draped carelessly over a chair. It was more than an accessory. It was a trophy, a tangible proof of her conquest. She snatched it up, her fingers tracing the smooth fabric, a wicked gleam in her eyes. This tie, she decided, would be her weapon, a bold declaration of her rekindled connection with Ted. She didn't hesitate, didn't strategize. Leslie was not one for subtlety, she thrived on the dramatic, the confrontational. She found Nicole later that day, standing in the garden of the sprawling estate that served as the backdrop for their tangled lives. The roses were in full bloom, their petals blood-red against the emerald leaves, a fitting stage for the confrontation about to unfold. Nicole, her auburn hair catching the sunlight, was lost in thought, her heart teetering on the edge of forgiveness. She had been considering giving Ted another chance, believing his promises of change, his vows to rebuild what they had lost. But Leslie's arrival shattered that fragile hope like glass under a hammer. "Nice tie, isn't it?" Leslie said, her voice a low, taunting purr as she dangled the crimson silk before Nicole's eyes. The gesture was brazen, deliberate, designed to wound. "Ted left it with me last night. You know how he gets when he's had a few too many." Nicole's face drained of color, her breath catching in her throat. The world seemed to tilt, the vibrant garden fading to a monochrome blur. She stared at the tie, its vivid hue a mocking reminder of her own naivety. Leslie's words were a blade, slicing through the fragile trust she had begun to rebuild. "You're lying," Nicole whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her doubt. "Am I?" Leslie stepped closer, her smile sharp as a shard of glass. "Ask him yourself, darling." He wasn't exactly complaining. The confrontation was brief but devastating. Nicole turned and fled, her heart a storm of rage and heartbreak. Leslie watched her go, the ties still clutched in her hand, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She had wanted Nicole to hurt, to feel the sting of betrayal as keenly as Leslie had when Ted first chose Nicole over her. But in her victory, Leslie failed to see the storm she had unleashed, the chain of events that would soon bring her world crashing down. The confession, a house of cards collapses. Nicole sought refuge in the quiet elegance of Anita's study, a sanctuary of polished mahogany and leather-bound books. Anita, the matriarch of this fractured family, sat behind her desk, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp as a hawk's. She had seen too much, endured too much, to be swayed by tears or theatrics. But when Nicole burst in, her face streaked with tears, her voice raw with anguish, Anita listened. "He did it again," Nicole choked out, collapsing into a chair. "Ted. With Leslie. She showed me his tie, Anita. She bragged about it." Anita's expression remained impassive, but her hands tightened around the pen she held, the knuckles whitening. She had known Leslie's reckless nature, had seen the chaos she left in her wake, but this was a step too far. Leslie's actions were not just a betrayal of Nicole, they were a direct challenge to the fragile order Anita had fought to maintain. And Anita was not a woman to be challenged lightly. Ted, summoned to the study an hour later, looked like a man facing his own execution. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot, the weight of his guilt etched into every line of his body. "It was a mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing." Anita's gaze was icy, unyielding. "You knew enough to destroy her," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "And you let Leslie parade it like a trophy." Ted had no defense, no excuses left to offer. He confessed everything, the drunken haze, Leslie's arrival, the night that should never have happened. Nicole, standing in the corner, listened in silence, her heart breaking anew with every word. When Ted finished, the room was heavy with the weight of his betrayal, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Anita rose from her chair, her movements slow and deliberate, like a queen preparing to pass judgment. "Nicole," she said, her voice softening just a fraction, "you don't need to stay for this." Nicole nodded, her eyes dull with pain, and left the room without a word. The door closed behind her with a soft click, sealing Ted's fate. The retribution, Anita's wrath. Anita turned her gaze on Ted, but her thoughts were already elsewhere, fixed on Leslie, the instigator, the provocateur, the woman who had dared to toy with the lives of those under Anita's protection. Leslie was no stranger to controversy, her life had been a series of calculated risks and impulsive decisions. But this time, she had crossed a line that Anita could not forgive. Leslie was Barbara's daughter, a fact revealed only recently in a dramatic twist that had shaken the family to its core. Barbara, Anita's late sister, had left behind a trust fund, a legacy meant to secure her daughter's future. Leslie, with her charm and cunning, had assumed that legacy was hers by right, a safety net to cushion her reckless lifestyle. But Anita, as the executor of Barbara's estate, held the power to change that. "You think you can waltz through this family, leaving wreckage in your wake?" Anita's voice was a low growl when she confronted Leslie later that day. They stood in the grand foyer of the estate, the chandelier above casting fractured light across the marble floor, a fitting backdrop for the fracture in their relationship. Leslie, dressed in a defiant shade of scarlet, met Anita's gaze without flinching. "I did what I wanted," Leslie said, her chin lifted. "Ted made his choice. Nicole needs to get over it." Anita's eyes narrowed, her lips thinning into a hard line. "You don't get to decide what Nicole feels. And you don't get to toy with this family's legacy." She stepped closer, her presence commanding, unyielding. "You think Barbara would have wanted her daughter to act like this? To betray, to manipulate, to destroy?" Leslie's confidence faltered, just for a moment, but she quickly recovered, tossing her hair with a dismissive laugh. "Barbara's gone, Anita. And I'm her daughter. That money is mine." "Not anymore," Anita said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "You've proven you're not worthy of her legacy. I'm cutting you out of the trust fund. Every penny." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Leslie's smile vanished, her eyes widening in disbelief. "You can't do that," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "That's my inheritance." "I can, and I will," Anita replied, her tone unyielding. "You've made your choices, Leslie. Now you'll live with the consequences." The fallout, a family in ruins. The news of Anita's decision spread through the estate like wildfire, igniting tensions and unraveling alliances. Leslie, stripped of her financial security, became a pariah, her once charmed life now a precarious tightrope walk. She lashed out, accusing Anita of cruelty, of playing God with her future. But Anita was unmoved, her resolve as solid as the stone walls of the estate. Nicole, meanwhile, grappled with her own pain. Ted's betrayal had shattered her trust, but Anita's decisive action gave her a strange sense of vindication. Yet, it came at a cost. The family, already fractured by secrets and lies, was now on the brink of collapse. Nicole withdrew, her heart too raw to engage with the chaos around her. Ted, racked with guilt, tried to make amends, but his efforts were met with cold indifference. He had lost Nicole's trust, Anita's respect, and any hope of redemption. His drunken mistake had cost him everything, and the weight of that loss was a burden he would carry for years to come. Leslie, however, was not one to go quietly. She plotted and schemed, determined to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. She sought allies among the estate's staff, whispered promises of loyalty and reward, but her reputation preceded her. Few were willing to risk Anita's wrath for a woman whose own actions had led to her downfall. The legacy, a question of worth. As the days turned to weeks, the estate settled into an uneasy quiet, the echoes of the confrontation lingering like ghosts in the halls. Anita, ever the guardian of her sister's memory, reflected on her decision. Had she been too harsh? Had she let her anger cloud her judgment? Barbara had loved Leslie, flaws and all, and Anita wondered if she had honored that love or betrayed it. But Leslie's actions had left little room for mercy. She had chosen to wield her power recklessly, to hurt those around her for her own gain. Anita's decision, though harsh, was a stand for accountability, a reminder that legacies are not just inherited, they are earned. For Nicole, the path forward was uncertain. She mourned the loss of the life she had envisioned with Ted, but she also found strength in her own resilience. She began to rebuild, step by painful step, determined to forge a future free from the shadows of betrayal. And Leslie? She stood at a crossroads, her future uncertain, her heart a battleground of defiance and despair. The loss of the trust fund was more than a financial blow, it was a rejection of her place in the family, a denial of her identity as Barbara's daughter. Whether she would rise from the ashes or succumb to her own demons remained to be seen. Conclusion, a saga unfinished. In Beyond the Gates, the story of Leslie, Ted, Nicole, and Anita is a tapestry woven with threads of passion, betrayal, and retribution. Anita's decision to strip Leslie of her inheritance was a seismic shift, a moment that redefined the boundaries of family and loyalty. As the characters navigate the fallout, their choices will shape not just their own futures, but the legacy of the estate itself. What lies ahead for Leslie? Will she find a way to reclaim her place, or will her defiance lead to further ruin? Can Nicole heal from the wounds of betrayal, and will Ted ever find redemption? And what of Anita, the matriarch whose iron will hold the family together, and tears it apart? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain, in the world of Beyond the Gates, no secret stays buried, and no sin goes unpunished.